Okay, right now I'm the executive director of Education Voices Inc., otherwise known as EVI. What we do is provide student advocacy services for students, for children. I think everybody knows pretty much, what we do and who we are. For the most part, when a student feels like, or a family feels like their child's rights have been violated in the public school system, we go in and assist them. Try to make sure, just basically protecting their rights, trying to make sure that everything is done according to the regulations in the state of Delaware and the federal regulations.
Now, how long you been doing that?
Since 1998, I did it. 1998, I probably I've done it for free. Parents call me and I would just go help. I think initially I started just as being a PTA parent, and I was at Shortridge Academy, and I remember Minnie Bazell was there, and shortly after, a lot of people started to call me the mayor of the school because as a PTA member initially and as the president, I started to find that a lot of things we were doing were like bake sales and stuff like that, and a lot of parents would have other issues that were within the school. So they started to call on me, and I started to look at the code of conduct and look at different laws and started to realize that maybe the public schools aren't necessarily doing what they're supposed to be doing every single time. So that's pretty much how it got started. And so as I started to move on, as my kids began to get older and I wasn't the PTA president anymore, I was told, I remember one time Sam Guy said, because I used to do a lot of stuff like in the community, civic association president, did a lot of stuff on public safety, went to the community policing academy and all that kind of stuff. And then I remember one day Sam Guy told me, you're in a lot of different directions. You got to figure out what you're going to do. And then I said, well, how do you figure that out? He said, what is it that you're most passionate about? And it was about education of children, just making sure that their rights were protected in the school system. So I continued to do that. That was probably around 2003, maybe 2004. I continued to advocate for students, continue to advocate for kids. Then I guess in 2013, I guess 2012, I remember Theo was working a case where he was an attorney for a student and he needed some assistance. So he was asking me some things on the case and I was giving him some advice. And he said, wow, this is very deep. It's very intricate. It's very different from being on the school side, because that was right after Moyer had closed. He said, if I get elected, I would like to have an organization that does this for city children. That's going to be a part of my policy initiative. Would you be willing to come and run it? I said, absolutely. In 2013, when he went into office, he called me and we began the process of starting to try to develop an organization, developed a nonprofit, got incorporated and everything that was associated with developing an official organization. And so that was the first year that I actually got paid to do student advocacy in 2013.
Oh, wow. So we know how you got into it. So, all these accusations that came out, been coming out of Devon Hynson been stealing money, Devon Hynson been doing this, and, along with other parties. What do you got to say with that?
Well, number one, I don't think that they were saying that I was stealing money. I think the perception is that there's probably not a fair and impartial process to dispense grant monies through the city. Is highly subjective, and I don't necessarily disagree with that position, right? I'm saying I was asked to do something, and I did the job that I was asked to do, right? So in terms of whether it is scrupulous to do it that way, I just think that it's done that way across the state. I do agree that there should be some other measures, right? There should be, if this whole city council wasn't apprised of the fact that we were getting grant money for this organization, I think it's a situation where they should have been informed about that. I don't necessarily, if I was on city council, I probably would have known. I went to city council every single year. We had to do a presentation for education, youth, and families department. So I'm on WITN, right? So we had to do a presentation every single year. So I don't know how the intercommunication worked, and it was never my intent to try to act like we weren't getting the money. Anybody that asked us, we said we're funded by city council. It's not like we said we were funded by city council and these four agencies. We were solely funded by city council. And I thought that this was an initiative that they really appreciated, because a lot of the council members sent me clients. So in terms of what's going on, I think some of the scrutiny or the issues that people are having, I agree with, right? The fact that
Such as what?
like, okay, if there is grant money available, I do think that people should have an opportunity to compete for that money. I don't disagree. You know, even though that we were the beneficiary of getting a grant, without, because I didn't necessarily even know it was a grant, right? I just thought that we were starting this organization. It was argued in the paper in 2013 because they were saying that the city council shouldn't do an initiative like this. Once that was done, I thought it was clear what direction we were going in, and maybe it's a shame on me for not digging deeper to understand the knowledge level of each person that was on city council. So I do agree with the fact that there should be some people should have an opportunity to compete because there's a lot of great nonprofit organizations out there, and I think that they should all have a fair shot. But that goes throughout the whole state, right? I don't think it should just be city council has a competitive process. I think everybody should. I think if it's a service that's needed in the community, you can communicate that on paper. I think you'll be able to get the grant funds.
Now some people might be saying, "Oh, it's easy for him to say that now."
Right.
Right. But you're not. I don't want to say, but you're saying like right now, the organization that was developed was on the up and up.
Absolutely, it was on the up and up. I mean, we did the service that they paid the organization to do. We advocated for children. I mean, when you talk about $150,000 with 4 staff members, you're not. I mean, yes, I don't want to discount the fact that it's a lot of money over 4 years, right? But when you're talking about having staff, having an office that we have here, we have a 4-office, 1,500 square foot office. We had a receptionist, 2 advocates, myself. Dealt with over 203 cases last year. So you have all the costs associated with running the organization, which I thought was an initiative of city council. This is what they wanted to do. Like, I really thought that this was something that people valued. If they didn't value it, I didn't think that we would be around because, again, I'm contentious, right? I'm rebellious. So I'm a personality that people don't really want to associate themselves with. So my assumption was this was something that was needed. And that's the only reason why I was selected to do it, right? It's only me and Jay pretty much who do it. And he couldn't do it. So they said, let's get Devon. And that's what I did. So I can't necessarily say that that it shouldn't have been a competitive bidding process. And had I've known, if I would have known the way people are looking at it right now, on the front end, I would have fought this. But I thought we litigated this already back in 2013 because I was in the paper then. It was myself. There was a guy named James Roll who were the original founders and the ones who did all the work to get the organization up and running to be a bona fide nonprofit. So I thought at that time it was done, and everybody agreed with the initiative.
Business as usual, just business as
usual.
And that's that until
correct until all this stuff comes out, and then there's so you start talking about people were saying that there's another organization out there now, and I don't. Again, this is the organization that I'm the executive director of, and right now we're fighting for viability. I think the main regret that I have, other than not making it abundantly clear to city council that they were funding us, because I could not conceive of how they wouldn't have known, right? But the biggest regret I have is that I didn't create a plan for sustainability much earlier, right? Because now you've lived off of city council for this period of time, and now we don't really have anywhere to turn. So it's back to volunteering again, right? And just doing the best you can with what you have until you can't do it anymore.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying? At this level. And let's understand, when I first started, I did maybe 20 cases a year to 203 a year. So I may not be able to function on that level, but I'll still be able to function. And what I always told people, one of the things that people used to call me and they used to say, I've been calling you, and I say, I apologize, because they call me. I get phone calls early in the morning. I get phone calls late at night. I get phone calls on the weekends, right? So this wasn't a 40-hour job. I work 60, 70, sometimes most of the time 80 hours a week. So one thing I always told them is that a little bit of help from me is better than no help from anyone, because I don't think that people understand how difficult it is when your child, you don't feel, is getting the services that they're required to get in the educational system. I mean, you have people that lose jobs as a result of it. There's people who end up in a hospital because of stress-related issues. I mean, when when a person is calling your home every single day and telling you that your child can't come to school today and you have a job, I mean, that causes a real conflict, causes a real issue.
Why do you do it, Devin? Why do you do it? You volunteered when you first got into the game about this. What is it why you love to advocate for kids so much?
I believe, right, in a historical view, I believe that when things were going on with my children and I couldn't get redress, right, and how difficult it was to navigate the system, somebody who's somewhat articulate, right, and have the ability to read and to dissect things, I felt, in a way, I felt like giving up, right? I felt like, well, there's really nothing I could do because this system is so massive, and once they decide to impose their will on me, I mean, you're basically there. You want to resort to violence and all type of stuff. And so I believe that when I look back, the reason why I did that is because I didn't like people having to feel like that, number one. Number two, I know that every moment that you're trying to navigate the system is precious time lost with our kids, right? Because for every year that a student is behind, they actually lose like 2 years, right? We know based on research. So everybody else is moving forward. Your child is being excessively suspended. Maybe they've been expelled. Maybe they're not getting the educational services they're supposed to have, like maybe a one-on-one attention or speech services, whatever the case may be. Every year that they don't get those services, the other kids are moving forward a year, and your child is staying still. So technically, you're losing 2 years because that next year is spent trying to catch up. So those are pretty much the reasons. I don't like the way that it felt for me when I couldn't fix it, right? And none of my children had disabilities. It was just things that may have happened, and when I went in, I didn't really get the response. Like, for example, my children, when they left Shortledge Academy in 5th grade, all of them were in honors. But when they got to Skyline Middle School, they weren't in honors anymore. And it's because Skyline came up with a test, and if the kids didn't test, they couldn't get in the honors program. Now, I have one daughter, China, Deanna. She is not hyper intelligent, but she's a hard worker. So if you give her the stuff, she's going to do it, right? So she may not be able to perform well on that test, but if you give her a curriculum, she's going to meet it because she's going to do everything that she has to do to meet it. So I thought that was unfair, and just not being able to fix that, right, stuff like that was problematic for me. And then again, number two, watching our kids constantly when you go to the in-school suspension room, it's all African American and poor kids in there, all disabled kids in there. For the most part, you got Hispanic kids in there, poor and also disabled. When you look at suspension, the same dynamic. When you look at expulsion, the same dynamic. When you look at kids who are not doing well in terms of achievement, the exact same dynamic. So in a lot of ways, it was fighting for students who really didn't have a voice. You know what I'm saying? That's, to be honest, that's the passion I have. That's what drives me. You know, like when something happens, it's almost like I could be tired, and when a parent calls me and they tell me something happens, I start working right then. There's times I get calls 9 o'clock at night, and I start working on it right then. You know, I might send them a text message, tell them what to write in the email to the school, send them intake forms. I do a lot of stuff. So it's like, it just drives me to help folks with their children when I know a lot of times the system's not doing the right thing. That's just what I have passion for.
So how did this impact your life?
I think in a lot of ways, man, because when you look at the paper, like a lot of the accusations are more, I mean, I get where they're trying to go, but it sounds like it's more about me, right? So now you're pitting education voices up against the fire department. And I support, if you look at my Instagram, my son took a picture with the fire department. I 100% support the fire department. If it was up to me, the fire department could have got the money. You understand? I didn't know that was an option. It was never on the table. I wasn't thinking about it from that perspective. So when you start to do that and try to argue which cause is more worthy, that's disturbing to me because all I want to do is advocate. You know what I'm saying? That's all I want to do. And whether I can do it at this level or not, I'm going to continue to do it. I think, secondly, is that, you know, people are starting to dig into my past, you know what I'm saying? And most people that know me, I had a beautiful home on 24th and Jefferson Street, right? Unfortunately, me and my wife got a divorce, and I had to file bankruptcy. And as a result of filing bankruptcy, you know, the only way I could get the house back was for her to sign paperwork to come to basically relinquish the home to me. At the time, she wasn't willing to do that, and that's neither here nor there. Whether it was right or wrong, it was what it was, and as a result, evidently there were some taxes that I owed or some water bills that I owed. The house was subsequently sold as sheriff's sale, and so now people are digging on me saying, "Hey, well, how could that organization get a grant when he owed city taxes?" Number one, I didn't know that I owed the taxes. If I would have known that I owed the taxes, I would have, and that you could buy the house for the tax, I would have bought the house back on my own. You know what I'm saying? I would have went to fight to try to make sure that I could get the home back. I'm telling you, I love that house. I love the neighborhood. It was a great neighborhood. It was right there on 24th for Jefferson. Raised 2 dogs there. My whole family was raised there. We were there from 2000 until about 2012 when I filed bankruptcy. So that's how it's affected me. It's affected me because now people are questioning my integrity because I am doing what I've always done, advocating, right? If you go to every school district in this state, predominantly, people know who we are. We've sent them a request for records. We've been to an IEP meeting with one or multiple schools within their district. So it is affecting me because it's making me feel bad that I had a choice between fire department and Education Voices, and I chose Education Voices. Either way, I'm going to choose kids 100 times, right? And I'm going to advocate for kids no matter what. So those are the kind of things that are really affecting me when people start digging into, what has happened in your past, right? Because I'm not, again, I think the fact that I had those problems lets you know I'm not a rich man. 4 people at $150,000 a year, our office and all of our bills, when you look at the finances, that's what the money went for. It went for providing a service that we agreed to provide by contract. So that's how it's affected me, man. It's kind of frustrating me a little bit because I don't want to be in the middle of that fight. I'll fight my battles, right? Come to me about what it is. If you say that you don't like the way I advocated in the school, I don't mind defending that. Right? If you say that I was wrong about some records that I evaluated, stuff like that. But don't come to me about issues that really I can't necessarily control. The only thing I could control was the things that were here and making sure I advocated for kids and did right by the contract that we had, period.